back to another episode of the greatest show in the galaxy, the show where I, the curator, discuss my personal favorite show of all time, personal favorite franchise of all time, Doctor Who. And today we will be continuing our music month that I've decided for this month. However, as per usual, we will be starting with the birthdays of the past week from July 5th to July 11th. And starting us off, we actually have, well, we'll start off with a banger. We'll start with the biggest name on our list, for starters, which is on July 7th, the one, the only, Mr. Jon Pertwee, the Third Doctor. He played the Third Doctor in from 1970 all the way to 1974, the first Doctor to do more than 4 seasons, and I believe he was given an award for that at the time. Of course, he was preceded by, or rather succeeded by Tom Baker, who is actually the longest reigning live-action Doctor. So, good job with that. Next, also on, my mistake, on July 8th, we have a person by the name of Eric Chitty. He played coordinator Engine. It's been a while since I've seen that episode. He played coordinator Engine, as seen in this picture, in the 4-part Deadly Assassin. He also has a small role in the Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, the longest Doctor Who title of all time. On July, I made a bit of an oopsie, never mind. On July 7th, we have Matt Irvine. Irvine, I apologize for mispronouncing the name. I'm terrible with names. He was a visual effects designer for a handful of Fourth Doctor episodes, namely The Face of Evil, The Stones of Blood, The Creature from the Pit, Warrior's Gate, and Warriors of the Deep, as well as being a visual effects designer on A Girl's Best Friend, the pilot episode of K9 and Company, the K9 show, the K9 Sarah Jane show, that thankfully never really saw the light of day beyond the pilot episode. On July 10th, we have several people, as a matter of fact. We have, starting us off, John Sim. Obviously, he played the Master in the David Tennant run, as well as coming back for a brief reprisal of the role during the last, some of the last 2 Capaldi episodes. Also on June 10th, we have Jamie Glover. He played William Russell in An Adventure in Time and Space. Of course, the actor who played Ian Chesterton. He then reprised the role of Ian Chesterton on the various First Doctor Big Finish episodes. Next, we have, also on June 10th, Jackie Lane. Speaking of the First Doctor, she played companion Dorothea Dodo Chaplet in the First Doctor's run in the episodes The Massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve, The Ark, The Celestial Toymaker, The Gunfighters, The Savages, and The War Machines. Lastly, on June, actually that was the last one on June 10th. I'm nailing this today, by the way. On June 11th, we have 2. We have, starting us off, is Michael Pickard, Pickwoad. I apologize. I really hate to do this, but I'm just terrible with names. He was a production designer on a lot of the Stephen Moffat era Doctor Who episodes, from the 11th Doctor and even the 12th Doctor, and he was even a production designer on several of the episodes of the spin-off show Class. And lastly, Mr. David Graham. He was the Dalek voice during the Hartnell era, namely the Daleks, the Dalek Invasion of Earth, The Chase, Mission to the Unknown, and the Daleks' Master Plan. Side note, he also did voice a Dalek in the last episode of the Space Museum, but that's basically just a cutaway scene from The Chase. So that's why it's not credited over here. He also did the voice of the Mechanoids in the episode The Chase. And ironically, he's still alive. He's 96, and yeah, he's still doing stuff on Big Finish, which I am all happy with as a Dalek voice. So, two of the wonderful list of people we have here today, from Mr. John Pertwee, Eric Chitty, Matt Irvine, John Sim, Jane Glover, Jackie Lane, Michael Pico, and David Graham. Thank you all. We quite literally could not do this without you. Now, speaking of someone we quite literally could not do this without, and I apologize if you hear it in the background, my air conditioning is on because I quite literally could not do the show without it. It is a very hot country. It is the height of summer, and I'm wearing a warm coat and a scarf. So again, apologies if the sound really throws you off, but I can't do this without it. In any case, a person we quite literally could not really do the show without, or rather, a person that without them, the show, the revival era of Doctor Who probably would not exist, at least not would be as good as it is Mr. Murray Gold, the main composer for the first 10 seasons of the revival era. He was the main composer from Series 1 all the way to Series 10, and was the main composer of not 1, not 2, not 3, but 4 Doctors. Technically 5 if you include the War Doctor, but I mean that's just a bit of a technicality. Now, obviously, last week I talked about the wonderful work that Mr. Ron Grainer and Miss Delia Derbyshire did with the amazing, iconic Doctor Who theme that we all know and remember to this day in the BBC Radiophonic Workshop, as seen in this picture right here. And thankfully, while that episode actually did take a lot of time explaining and setting up a lot of things, because of that episode, I don't really have to do much setting up and expositioning in today's episode. Obviously, as I said last week, I took a lot of inspiration, rather a lot of information and research from the classical nerd, the person whose video I used a lot in preparation for these 2 episodes. And again, like I said last week, please, if you have the time, check out the Classical Nerds breakdown of the history of Doctor Who music. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Now, going off of some of the stuff that I mentioned in last week's episode, going off of stuff that I took from the Classical Nerds masterful video, the Doctor Who theme is split up into 3 separate sections that all work in tandem. The opening melody 1, melody 2, and the middle 8 section. While also something that I added on my own is that the music itself is made up of 3 different components. There's the rhythm, the da-da-da-dum, 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 the actual melody itself, which is comprised of the melody 1, melody 2, and the middle 8, and the extra added bonus stuff on top, which is just sound effects that happen to pertain to how the opening credits themselves look, which became much more prominent as the years went on. Now, thankfully, because there weren't as many changes to the theme in the modern era of the show as there were for the classic era of the show, I get to talk about something that I wanted to talk about last week, but sadly didn't. But in today's episode, because we are specifically addressing the modern era of the show, it's something that I cannot and will not omit from this discussion, which is the incidental music, the background music, the music that's used to set up the scenes themselves. As I mentioned last week, music is so important to the immersion of the viewer in the property that they happen to be watching. I brought up the examples of The Lord of the Rings. Try watching that without music. Star Wars without music. Harry Potter without music. It works the same as with Doctor Who. Doctor Who, at least in the modern era, does not work without its iconic music. To the effect that pretty much every single episode, with the exception of a few, I suppose, have their own unique, iconic theme specifically for that episode, which was then obviously then reused in other episodes. And if you actually go on Wikipedia and look up the list of Doctor Who composers, you will actually find that Doctor Who had a lot of composers over the 58 years that it's been on the air. Several dozen, as a matter of fact. But the thing is, if you look more closely at the list itself, you'll notice that most composers have actually done 1 to 5 episodes, roughly. Either 1, either 4, either 2, either you get the idea. The one that notable exception to that, especially from the classic era, is Dudley Simpson, who actually has composed 62 episodes. I'm not going to list all of them at the moment, but it is on Wikipedia. You can actually look it up and check it out. Now, the other main composer that has more than 5 episodes to his name, or rather more than 10, I should say, at least in the double-digit area, is Segun Akinowa. I apologize again if I'm mispronouncing the name. He's the main composer of the current run of Doctor Who under the tutelage of Chris Chibnall. And the only person on that list that actually, his list of episodes goes into the 3rd digit range is the aforementioned Murray Gold, with 120 episodes under his belt. The guy he basically did a lot for Doctor Who, and like I said, Doctor Who would not be the way that it is today without the helpful contribution of this person. Another thing that actually became really prominent during the modern era of the show, as opposed to the classic era of the show, is the release of Doctor Who soundtracks. Now, obviously, the first and second series of the show had their own soundtrack released, sort of a large disc with both seasons, and or rather series. Again, it all depends on how you choose to address it. But for subsequent seasons or series, they each had their own unique soundtrack release, and we will be discussing each and every one of those individually. We will not be talking about every single track on those soundtrack releases. I'm just going to be talking about specific ones that I think are worthy of note. Character themes, monster themes, atmospheric themes, and once again, something that pretty much became a staple for the Murray Gold era of the show is original songs, which is something that the classic era of the show, I believe, did only once, to my memory, which is actually an unofficial rap performed specifically for the episode The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, which is the episode that gave this show its name. But roughly every single season or series in the modern era of the show had at least one original song written and composed by Murray Gold and performed by a professional singer. And we will be discussing some of them today. For Series 1, first of all, we have to talk about the opening theme, which is something we did last week for every single Doctor. This, in my opinion, is the best opening theme, both on the music side as well as on the visual side. It is the theme that I immediately think of whenever I think about the Doctor Who musical theme. I mean, obviously, I loved every single version of the theme up until this point. I loved the 1960s theme. I loved the Peter Howell rendition in the 80s. I loved the other 2 changes that happened for the 6th Doctor and the 7th Doctor. I absolutely adore the movie version of the theme. I love some of the Big Finish renditions of the theme. And also I love the Matt Smith, Peter Capaldi, and Jodie Whittaker theme. But to me, when I think about Doctor Who, specifically the music, the number one thing that pops into my mind is the opening theme for not necessarily just the Christopher Eccleston season, but the entire first 3 seasons of the Revival era, Series 1, Series 2, and Series 3, which have had several changes happen throughout their reign, and we will be talking about them in this episode. Now, for today's episode, we will be the musical theme for Doctor Who. First of all, when Murray Gold joined the scene and became the sort of official composer of Doctor Who, by the time that happened, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop no longer really existed. I believe it closed down around 1998, which is around 2 years after the after the 1996 movie, and by the time they revived the show with Murray Gold taking on the helm of the show, they had to rely on something completely new. And as for I apologize, I should have had this ready to go before going live, but you know what? I'll do it live. So before when the show was brought back, the every single let's do it. I'll just do it that way. When the show was brought back, every single musical theme, at least for the first 10 seasons, was composed by Murray Gold and performed by the BBC London National Orchestra of Wales. I might be mispronouncing that. I might be getting that wrong. That is exactly what I was trying to look up while I was talking, but again, because it's me, I forgot to look that up. What are you going to do? I'm not going to redo that bit. We're doing it live. So what I'm going with this is that every single theme for the modern era of the show has been an orchestral theme. No longer the electronic music of the BBC Radiophonic Workshop. That just wasn't going to cut it. For many reasons, other than the fact that the BBC Radiophonic Workshop no longer exists. Or rather, no longer existed when they brought the show back. So every single theme for the show was composed by, as I mentioned, Murray Gold, and performed by a massive, large orchestra that you can actually see part of it behind me. There you go. And almost I believe every year, or at least every other year, that particular orchestra that I'm forgetting the name of performed several Doctor Who related songs and various different Doctor Who related proms all over the United Kingdom. Going for the opening theme for Doctor Who that I talked about a few minutes ago, the theme itself still remains pretty much the exact same as written by Ron Grainer and originally performed by Delia Derbyshire, except once again it was completely orchestral theme. And something pretty interesting that I learned from watching the Classical Nerds video, and something that I didn't really know, or at least knew half of it, the first rendition of the theme for the Christopher Eccleston season did not have the iconic middle 8, which is mine and a lot of other people's favorite part of the theme. The main reason for that is Murray Gold himself hates that part of the theme. I don't know what to tell you. He hates that part of the theme because he says it reminds him of a Christmas movie, a Christmas tune that I can't really remember the name of. But that's fine. I mean, that's his decision. But I mean, it's an iconic part of the theme, so you kind of have to put it in the theme itself. Which, if you go back and watch all the episodes for Christopher Eccleston's first season, that part of the theme that just does not exist. It was never recorded or composed by Murray Gold for that original season, which is why normally when the theme should do the transition towards the middle 8 part of the theme, it just sort of reverts back to the beginning of the original of the theme and just plays the entire theme all over again. Now, obviously, the theme itself starts with the iconic electronic scream that was originally made for the John Pertwee era episodes. Fitting that we mentioned John Pertwee already today on the show, but that whole electronic scream, the sound of, except this time it's a little bit different. While in the original classic era of the show, the electronic scream sort of continued on into sort of and sort of merged with the Melody One section of the theme. In the modern era of the show, the electronic scream just turns into a sort of can't really find a good way to explain it, but it sort of disperses into several smaller electronic sounds. It sounds like again, I'm using my voice and hand gestures to try and convey to you how the music of Doctor Who itself makes me feel. And then the actual rhythm part of the theme, the four knocks, which again, as I mentioned last week episode, and will actually come into more of an understanding in this episode of the show. I actually believe that rhythm is the heartbeat of a Time Lord, the four knocks, and obviously the idea of Time Lords having two hearts was added on much later than when the theme was written. Ironically, in John Pertwee's debut episode, but this is sort of my way of explaining what this rhythm means. Sort of retroactively trying to explain certain elements of the show. So the actual rhythm itself actually sounds a bit more like the beating of drums, which really does support my my theory, and the melody itself, the melody part of melody one part of the theme itself actually comes in a bit later, giving the actual four knocks rhythm some more time to breathe. And something that we'll actually notice quite often in the modern era of the show is that the rhythm part of the theme actually does change a little bit from Doctor to Doctor. But as for on the visual side of things, they brought back the time vortex tunnel type effect with which begins in a sort of a blue-colored tunnel with the electronic screen at the beginning. As we fly through this massive, busy tunnel, we see the TARDIS flying towards us. Rather, see the TARDIS coming up from behind where the camera is, moves further into the tunnel until we can't see it anymore, and then the camera just zooms out of an entire tunnel, zooms and focuses completely on the TARDIS itself, and does sort of a half spin, and then jumps or shoots right into a red-colored tunnel as the credits of the main actors of each episode suddenly appear inside the tunnel. We see, or rather, they turn to face the viewer, starting with Christopher Eccleston, and then another one which features the name of Billie Piper, and then the spinning new, we have it actually here, the spinning logo of the modern era of the show that says Doctor Who on it. It sort of looks like an eye with some flames in it, spins around, and just like the names of the actors and actresses, just superimposes itself on the viewer before flying upwards, revealing that the TARDIS once again wibbling and wobbling inside the TARDIS itself, and revealing the title of the episode with the writer. So no longer we have the title of the episode shows up first, then the name of the writer, and then the number of parts in that particular episode. We get that all in one shot. We get the title of the episode and the writer in one shot, And obviously, since the modern era of the show is no longer serialized, it's more episodic, we don't really get much in the way of parts for each individual episode. We do have that at least once or twice in the modern era of the show, but we'll talk about that when we'll have the time to do when we'll get to those episodes in particular. That is it for the main theme itself. A couple of notes that I wanted to bring up, though, is the idea of seeing the TARDIS flying through a specific type of space-time vortex tunnel-like effect, and then halfway through the theme, jumping into a different colored and a differently designed tunnel is something that actually stayed a part of the show for the entirety of the Murray Gold era of composing the theme. We've seen that in the Matt Smith era as well as the Peter Capaldi era. We have not seen that at all during the Jodie Whittaker era of the show. We'll get to those when, once again, the time is right for us to get there. Now, going back to Series 1, we have several characters that actually receive their own individual themes that play when a significant scene featuring those characters is currently taking place. Obviously, for the very first time ever, the Doctor himself has his own unique individual theme, which is noted on the soundtrack release as the Doctor's theme. Obviously, every single episode, every single Doctor had their own unique Doctor theme, but this theme in particular, which was written specifically for the Christopher Eccleston version of the Doctor, sort of became too iconic and too recognizable as the theme for the Doctor that it has actually been used for every single Doctor in the Murray Gold era of writing Doctor Who, which is the in its most basic form. It is a music, or rather a melody of a woman singing, and I'm pretty sure you already know the notes and the bars that she's singing in the song. The ooh, 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 ooh. I'm not going to continue to wreck your ears with my terrible singing voice. That is generally the song itself, and it was actually featured not only for every single Doctor in a certain variation of it, but it was also featured for Jodie Whittaker when she regenerated from Peter Capaldi. We actually hear that song being played for the last time, for now, during that particular scene, the regeneration scene from Capaldi to Whittaker. And obviously, like I said, variations of the theme have been played for various different Doctors, but for the most part, that individual theme has stayed pretty consistent as the main voice of the main song of the Doctor. And again, going into some theory territory for myself, again, headcanon, but I honestly believe that it's the sound of the TARDIS, that it's actually the TARDIS herself singing to the Doctor. Obviously, we know, especially from the modern era of the show, the TARDIS is a living being. It's a sentient creature, which the Doctor affectionately refers to as his girl, or her girl. And obviously, this could be just a trope of pilots naming their ships / planes / vehicles, sort of anthropomorphizing. I'm pretty sure I butchered that name, but that word, but anthropomorphizing their vessels to kind of give them more personality. Obviously, we know that the TARDIS itself does have personality and is quite often being presented as female, and we do hear that particular song play during specific moments when the TARDIS is also interacting with the Doctor. We also know that the TARDIS herself has a sort of symbiotic bond with the Doctor, just like every single TARDIS has a symbiotic bond with the Time Lord that is piloting her. That. So that is my bit of headcanon. Obviously, going back into some more character themes, the character of Rose Tyler also received her own unique theme. Several themes, as a matter of fact, but for the most part, her iconic theme has appeared all throughout the Christopher Eccleston series, as well as any major scenes involving her during the David Tennant season 2, I should say, and it was also played again once she returned for series 4. And for the first time in the show's history, the Daleks also received their own unique individual theme. It took several different tries to get right. Murray Gold actually tried several different versions of the theme of the Dalek theme itself, but for the first time ever, we actually have a sort of theme to identify the Daleks, which is a sort of a mixture of electronic music with orchestral sounds. The horizonta, horizonta. And again, I'm not going to bore you guys too much with my uninspired singing voice, but that is basically it. That's what I'm trying to convey. It's a sort of a mixture of the old meets the new, the electronic music, which does actually fit well with the Daleks themselves, being sort of cybernetically enhanced mutants with electronics running through their veins, and the danger and terror that the Daleks inflict in the hearts and minds of anyone who hears them, sees their silhouettes, and knows of their presence. Obviously, the character of Harriet Jones, Prime Minister, and yes, we all know who she is, also received her own unique individual theme, as well as I mentioned earlier, individual themes for almost every single episode, namely Boomtown and Father's Day are two specific episodes that really come to mind. Moving on to season 2 or series 2, again, depending on who you ask. Finally, the middle 8-bit part of the melody made its triumphant return in David Tennant's debut episode, The Christmas Invasion. I'm not 100% sure if Murray Gold recomposed the entire theme or just added that part in. And to be honest, I really don't care. I'm just really glad to hear my favorite part of the theme itself make a return. And obviously, that is the main reason why I am a Doctor Who fan, oddly enough. I watched one episode, which ironically was New Earth, the first episode of series 2, and I wasn't 100% on board with the show just yet, but my mom and stepdad continue to hear continue to watch more episodes of Doctor Who, and I just heard those episodes being played in the background, and all I really, what really caught my ear was the theme playing at the end of each episode, and what really, really did capture my heart and soul was the middle 8 part of the theme. I decided that in order to listen to that theme a bit more. Again, remember, YouTube was a very new thing at the time, so I couldn't just go on YouTube and just listen to the theme over and over again. The only way I had to listen to that theme was to watch more Doctor Who episodes, and that is really what led to me falling in love with the show, oddly enough. So the fact that Murray Gold brought the theme back for series 2 specifically is the main reason why I am a Doctor Who fan. I don't know that I would be talking to you about Doctor Who today if that hadn't happened. I apologize for the long tangent, but there are some things that needed to be said regarding this. Obviously, as far as the visual side of things, the theme didn't really change all that much. They just replaced the name of Christopher Eccleston with the name of David Tennant, and that is how the theme continued to look for the remainder of the David Tennant era of the show, or as I like to call it, the Russell T Davies era of the show. Moving into some iconic music from Series 2, much like the Daleks before them, the Cybermen also received their own unique, individual, iconic theme, which has gone on to become the recognizable theme for the Cybermen going forward in any other appearance and iteration of the Cybermen throughout the first 10 seasons of the revival era of the show. The whole da, 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 I believe, unlike the Daleks theme, though, this Cyberman theme is completely orchestral with a singing choir, which happens to be the main modus operandi for Murray Gold in a lot of his themes. Another thing that actually is worthy of note, or rather part of the um, uh, of the soundtrack, which is worth noting, is Song for 10, which is the first original song written and composed by Murray Gold, specifically to welcome the 10th Doctor into this role, which, as I said, it was the first and certainly not the last original song composed specifically for the show itself. And the song itself can be heard immediately after the destruction of the Sycorax ship, and when the Doctor takes down Harriet Jones, the former Prime Minister. And yes, again, we know who she is, but the song itself can be heard playing when the Doctor is inside the TARDIS wardrobe, picking out the iconic wardrobe that we all know the 10th Doctor to have. The brown pinstripe suit and the long coat, which I'm wearing a version of right now. Obviously, the song was played during the Christmas celebrations of the Tylers in Jackie Tyler's apartment. That is, like I said, the first, but not the last, original song composed and created for the revival era of the show. Moving on, transitioning into series 3, and my favorite modern era companion, Martha Jones, who also received her own unique individual theme, Martha's theme, which can be heard playing anytime that a specific scene involving the character of Martha Jones is taking place. Another character, a major character that also received his own theme, I suppose in series 2, but it was much more prominent in series 3, is the character of the Face of Bo. Face of Bo received his own theme when we see him in the aforementioned New Earth, the first episode that I've ever watched, as well as hearing that theme play in the other New Earth-based episode, Gridlock, while also returning by the end of the finale episode, The Sound of Drums, when Captain Jack Harkness, of all people, makes a slight reference to the fact that he might actually be the Face of Bo, which is pretty interesting. Obviously, from what we know about Captain Jack, he is immortal. He regrows limbs. He can live forever, pretty much as a result of the Bad Wolf interference. And according to some fan theories online, at one point during his life, he got his head decapitated by the Headless Monks, which I think it's something pretty interesting to consider, because the Headless Monks decapitate you while you're still alive, and your head continues to function individually from your body. It's not like he got his head cut off, died, and had to regrow either a new head or an entirely new body. Not something he hasn't done before, obviously, but since his head was still alive and perfectly preserved, it would make sense that he would be the Face of Bo through that way. But I decided to bring that up because I think it's interesting that the character of Captain Jack Harkness himself doesn't really have his own unique theme. At least it's not as far as I can remember. But giving him his own unique theme does actually seem to make sense. Another character that received her own unique individual theme is the character of Donna Noble, who has had her theme played during The Runaway Bride, her debut episode, and continued to play during the fourth season of the Revival era, whenever a major scene involving Donna Noble was taking place. And finally, a new original song was written for the Runaway Bride episode of All the Strange, Strange Creatures. I believe that's the name of the episode, which also served as the main title for the main sort of action-y theme for the series during that time. It was played during the Christmas special, the Runaway Bride, as mentioned. Another completely original theme written for Series 3 was My Angel Put the Devil in Me, as performed by the character Tallulah, 3 L's and an H, in the episode Daleks in Manhattan. It was actually the first original song composed for the series, which was not played during a Christmas special. Again, something important to point out. Obviously, the aforementioned, again, I'm just getting really lucky today, John Sim, the master, received his own theme, which is directly derived from the Four Knocks, which he reportedly hears in his head the entire time, which was then later revealed in The End of Time Part 2 to be the actual heartbeat of a Time Lord, which further supports my fan theory on the subject. He also received, I don't know where I was going with that, but transitioning into Series 4, because I realized I will now over the 40-minute mark, so we have to really speed things along. Once again, features the return of Donna Noble, as well as her theme, and two new iconic songs written specifically for the show itself, or rather the series itself, were the songs of Captivity, as well as the song of Freedom. They weren't technically, their names technically were actually referenced in the narrative of the episode that they featured in. The song of Captivity was primarily used in the episode Planet of Ood, with a version of the Song of Freedom playing by the end of that same episode. However, a much better, in my opinion, much more epic version of the Song of Freedom was played at the end of, or rather close to the end of Journey's End, the finale episode of that same season. In my opinion, the best episode of Doctor Who of all time. People can argue, and that is, of course, their prerogative to do so, but I just love it. So deal with that. A song that was written originally for Series 2, but only appeared in one episode, and became much more prominent during Series 4, as well as the 2008 to 2010 specials, is the main Unit theme. Again, for the first time in Doctor Who's history, Unit received its own unique individual theme, which again played in only one episode of the second series, The Christmas Invasion, but was repeatedly played all throughout Series 4 and the David Tennant specials leading up to his regeneration scene in The End of Time Part 2. Now, speaking of The End of Time Part 2, certain elements in the narrative could actually affect certain things that have happened with the opening title sequence of Doctor Who for Series 5, which featured the debut of the 11th Doctor, Matt Smith, alongside his signature companion, Amy Pond. Now, going back to the theme itself, obviously, David Tennant, for his fourth and final series, received his own unique individual theme, which, in a way, is just an enhancement of the theme written for the Christopher Eccleston theme, the theme that actually continued on being the main theme for the 10th Doctor for his first two seasons. But by the fourth season, he received a sort of updated and upgraded, if you will, version of the theme, which actually features an electric guitar as well as a piano section towards the middle section, where the title of the episode and the writer appears on screen. But for the Matt Smith era of the show, um, the actual rhythm itself, as I mentioned earlier, really did change. While it actually received an enhancement during the David Tennant theme for Series 4 in the Matt Smith era, it was actually more of a bit of a boingy sound, which might be a reference to the Delaware theme that we mentioned last week, which is commonly referred to as John Pertwee on a pogo stick. And I'm not making this up. This is the actual nickname for the Delaware theme. But more importantly, towards the middle section of the theme itself, it is actually accompanied by an actual orchestra, or rather a choir, singing ominously while the title of the episode is being shown to the audience. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the theme of, rather the concept of the TARDIS flying through a certain type of vortex and then transitioning into a different type of vortex by the middle half of the theme was something that was introduced in the Christopher Eccleston theme, but expanded upon in other versions of the theme with subsequent Doctors. First of all, we see the TARDIS itself flying through a sort of storm cloud vortex with actual lightnings going on, some of which even seem to strike the TARDIS at several different occasions, which then transitions into a sort of lightning shot of the title of the name of the actors involved in the episode. And something that's pretty interesting to note is that lightning sound effects can actually be heard during the opening title sequence, but only if you're actually watching the opening title sequence of the episode. If you actually go online or on YouTube or just search for the actual Doctor Who soundtrack itself, you will not be able to hear any of the lightning sound effects playing, or rather being heard, while the theme itself is being played. And also you can't really hear it when you hear the theme being played when listening to an 11th Doctor audiobook or Big Finish short story episode or anything of the sort. So it's something pretty interesting that the lightning sounds themselves can only be heard when during the opening title sequence on the television side of things. So something pretty interesting to note. Once again, we have the return of some individual character themes for certain characters from Doctor Who. A theme that was originally composed for Series 4 but became much more prominent during the Matt Smith era was A Song for Song, which is the main theme for River Song, and was last heard and was actually heard several episodes during the 11th Doctor era, and then completely was dropped from the roster of songs being reused for subsequent Doctors, until making its final and triumphant return in The Husbands of River Song, which of course was River Song's final episode. Something that I forgot to mention earlier is that for now, in Series 4 at least, a brand new Dalek theme was written called The Dark and Endless Dalek Night. I believe that is the full title of the song itself. It was played primarily during The Stolen Earth and Journey's End, while also making a slight return in Victory of the Daleks, as well as The Day of the Doctor, which obviously Victory of the Daleks was part of Series 5, which is why it's appropriate for that to be mentioned here. Obviously, Amy Pond received her own unique theme. The Doctor received his own iconic new theme, the 11th for the 11th Doctor, much like the 10th and 9th Doctors before him also had their own unique theme. And something pretty interesting to note about the actual opening title sequence itself is that the middle 8 part of the theme was really only used once in the episode The Beast Below, the second episode featuring the 11th Doctor, and was never really heard again in any of the 11th Doctor's episodes, which saddens me once again because it's my favorite part of the theme. And normally, whenever the theme had to transition into what would be considered the middle eight part, it was just a repeat of the woo, woo, woo until the song ends, which sort of makes it feel like Murray Gold was really trying to avoid having to play the middle eight part of the theme again, even though he did actually compose a new version of the middle eight for this theme, specifically for the full version of the theme. So once again, if you want to hear the full version of the theme, you have to go to either YouTube to listen to the full version of the theme, or listen to some audiobooks from the 11th Doctor that actually feature the full version of the theme. So that's really all I can say for that. Now, as for the title sequence itself, there is another fan theory out there, not my own, but something that actually does seem to make sense, is that following the events of the End of Time Part 1 and Part 2, when Gallifrey returned and actually almost brought back the Time War itself back into existence, is the main reason for the time vortex itself being so messy, with the rain clouds and lightning strikes, which then transitions into another tunnel-ish time vortex of flames and fire and brimstone almost, because Gallifrey was threatening to return, and it almost brought back the end of the universe once again as a result of the Time War. More on that later. But for Series 6, that's Series 7, sorry. For Series 6, the theme itself actually stayed relatively the same. And for my memory, I can't really quite remember any significant new songs added for Series 6. However, I will say that the Christmas special, A Christmas Carol, does actually feature its own unique individual original song, written once again for the specifically for the Christmas special, called Abigail's Song. Something that I completely forgot earlier was for Voyage of the Damned. Another completely original song was written, The Stowaway, or My Stowaway. I can't remember the exact name of the song itself, but it's called The Stowaway, and it can be heard sung on the Titanic as the Doctor notices the meteorites and almost gets himself arrested by the crewmen. That is the song being played there. But like I said, other than Abigail's song, almost no new original songs were written for the Series 6, other than a sort of variation of the song Tick Tock Goes the Clock, which can be heard in multiple different episodes of this season or series. For Series 7, the opening title sequence really did receive a massive, rather not a massive change, but a slight change. It was a lot darker in color and very poorly lit for the first half of Series 6, or Series 7A, because Series 7, is split into two individual parts, Series 7A and Series 7B. And for the first half of the season, like I said, a more darkly lit tunnel. The lightning strikes no longer appear when the names of the actors show up on screen, but rather is sort of a drop, a drop of water being dropped into a still body of water type effect, as the names of Matt Smith, which transitions into Karen Gillan, which transitions into Arthur Darvill appear on screen, and then it actually transitions into the TARDIS itself. First of all, in the first two Matt Smith seasons, the TARDIS itself sort of spins toward the camera, so to speak, and then it just becomes part of the Doctor Who title. That was not a factor in Series 7A, where the TARDIS just happens to appear out of nowhere, which transitions into the newly designed Doctor Who logo, which can be seen over here. And the logo itself had a completely unique design depending on which episode you happened to be watching at that time. Then for Series 7B, the title sequence completely got revamped, along with a variation of the theme written for Matt Smith's first season, but sort of a much more menacing and much more sinister version of that theme, as we see the TARDIS flying through space, meeting several different, bumping through several different planets, and then eventually a sort of storm cloud, which also features Matt Smith's face, which is the first time you actually see the face of the actor playing the Doctor for the first time since the 1989 cancellation of the show. And then it just transitions into a newly designed time vortex, which features the title of the episode with the writer and the TARDIS sort of flying towards, spinning and flying towards the camera, or rather the viewer's perspective, and then the TARDIS doors open to reveal the actual episode that you're about to watch. Now, again, while the theme itself has received a lot of criticism for looking completely cheap and badly designed, I see it as, going back to the fan theory that I mentioned earlier, the time vortex is getting more and more distorted and more violent as events from the past are threatening to return, in the form of the War Doctor sort of breaking out of the time lock of the Time War, and just the Time War threatening to happen all over again. These changes were completely dropped for Peter Capaldi's first season, Series 8, which, something that it's pretty noteworthy to mention, the actual title sequence itself was originally designed by a fan on YouTube, and the production team, I believe it was actually Stephen Moffat himself, who saw that and really liked that design of the titles, that he actually hired the person to actually make the opening title sequence for the 12th Doctor's theme, which, once again, the rhythm slightly changed from being a da-da-da-dum, 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 to being more of a dum 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 dum, but it still maintains the 4 knocks, which I contend is the heartbeat of a Time Lord. Now, as for the title sequence itself, it sort of starts with flying through a vortex made entirely of cogs and gears, almost as if flying through a metaphysical clock. Once eventually the TARDIS itself shows up, goes from one side of the tunnel to another, similar to the Christopher Eccleston theme, but then that title sort of becomes a giant, massive clock with Roman numerals covering the entirety of the theme, of the screen, which then transitions into a flight through space, several planets flying overhead, and then just shows us the attack eyebrows of Peter Capaldi himself before turning into an actual proper time vortex. Now, unlike the Matt Smith era of time vortexes in the opening title sequence, this is a much more safe and calm version of the time vortex, which going back to the fan theory that I mentioned earlier, sort of indicates that time is that since the Time War is over, Gallifrey technically wasn't destroyed in the Time War, but rather saved by the three Doctors in the Day of, or rather all the Doctors in the Day of the Doctor, and just removed to a different place. Time is a much more safe place to be in. The time vortex is a much more calm and serene place to travel through, which is why this version of the theme is actually much more subdued as opposed to some of the Matt Smith era themes, title sequences, I should say. A major problem that the Capaldi era title sequence has suffered greatly from is that in almost every single episode, the actual music itself was completely out of sync with the visuals happening on screen, which definitely infuriated a lot of people. However, during the Capaldi era, the production team decided to get very, very experimental with the title sequence of the show. One episode featuring an entirely electric guitar version of the theme, specifically for the episode Before the Flood. One version of the theme, specifically for Christmas, features snow in the actual time vortex itself, whilst the TARDIS is flying through it. And specifically for the episode The Husbands of Riversong, the planets themselves are being replaced by Christmas ornaments during the opening title sequence of the theme itself. To the best of my memory, there were no notable themes or original songs written for Series 8, but because I was trying to get too ahead of myself and really finish this episode as fast as possible, because I'm already past the 1 hour mark. Something that I forgot to mention for Series 7, more specifically Series 7B, is the masterpiece of a song, The Long Song, which was featured in the episode The Rings of Akatan, and its lyrics can be seen right here on the screen itself, and it's one of the best songs, original songs written and composed by Murray Gold himself for the show. Now, again, I'm really trying to speed things along because we really have to get to get going, and we still have a Doctor and a half to get through. But for Series 9 of Doctor Who, the second season featuring Peter Capaldi, the brand new song, rather brand new original music debuted, which is simply titled "The Shepherd's Boy," referencing the story by the Brothers Grimm, and was heavily featured in the penultimate episode of Series 9, Heaven Sent, and was then featured several other times throughout Peter Capaldi's final season, Series 10. Again, for reasons that I'm really trying to make this episode short, the character of Clara Oswald also received her own unique individual theme, which was first debuted in Series 7B, continued in Series 8, and by the end of Series 9, the theme itself was sort of transitioned into a guitar song that Capaldi was playing on his electric guitar in the final episode of that season, Hellbent. A version of Clara's theme can also be heard in the debut episode of, or the pilot episode, I should say, of the Doctor Who spin-off show Class, For Tonight We Die, as the Doctor in that episode himself sees the name Clara Oswald written on the names of several deceased people of the Coal Heel Academy. Going back to Series 10, it also features the return of the character Missy, who also received her own theme. But again, and for the purposes of making this episode really short, because I really do need to finish this off, after Capaldi left the series, Murray Gold, who has composed the entire show for the past 12 years since the revival era, was replaced by new composer Segun Akanoa. Again, I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. I am terrible with name, but I believe that is the proper name of this composer, Segun Akanawa. Well, he has had several individual themes for each for the Jodie Whittaker era of the show. In my opinion, and again, this is just my own personal opinion and personal evaluation, the theme music of Segun Akanoa have not really captured the imagination in the same way that any of the Murray Gold themes have for each individual episode, for each individual character. The Dalek theme that was introduced in the episode Dalek was completely dropped. The Cybermen iconic theme, which was introduced in Rise of the Cybermen, was also similarly dropped. There was no longer an iconic theme for the Master, and generally speaking, no more iconic themes for each individual character, other than the Doctor herself, also received her own unique individual theme composed by Akinoa. Also in Series 3, Gallifrey, the planet itself, also received its own unique identifiable theme, which was used sporadically throughout the rest of the Murray Gold era of composing music for the show, and was again completely dropped for the 13th Doctor's run. Not even in episode taking place on Gallifrey itself, the theme itself can be heard, which is a bit of a sad tragedy in my opinion. But for Series 1 of Series 1 for the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, which was also known as Series 11. As I mentioned, the Doctor received her own unique individual theme, and the opening title sequence was sort of meant as a throwback to the original 1960s classic music theme, featuring a sort of updated version of the Delia Derbyshire theme from the 1960s with a modern bit of a twist on it. And as for the visuals themselves, it really just featured a sort of time vortex that comes out of nowhere and on a black screen, slowly growing and pulsating like the beating of a heart until covering the entire theme. And what the hell are you doing here?
Oh, just as a friendly reminder, say, hey, we're waiting.
Sorry, my bad.
That,
what are you doing? You're crushing this episode. Get the hell out of here.
I'm what is it? What is it that the third Doctor says? I'm reversing the polarity.
Well, Soda, ladies and gentlemen, coming here to tell me that I need to finish this episode because this episode's already gone on long enough and we have another show to record. But as I mentioned, the 13th Doctor's theme was primarily a purple visuals of what appeared to be the 1960s to 1970s flat 2D visuals brought into 3D form, which also features the names of all the actors associated with each individual episode. And in later seasons, not Series 12, but particularly for the Flux, which is Jodie Whittaker's final full season. Try saying that when you're drunk. The visuals themselves also have this sort of bright rainbow color features on them, which is very reminiscent of the visual seen on promotional material for the Flux itself. Going back to the Flux itself, and this is what I'm going to use to end today's episode on. In the episode Village of the Angels, when spoiler alert, if you haven't seen this episode has been around for several months now, so you should have been able to see it by now. In that episode itself, the Doctor basically turns into an angel, a weeping angel, by the end of the episode, and that is the main cliffhanger for that episode itself. But when and that is how the episode itself ends, and it ends without the rhythm, the four knocks rhythm that can be heard in every single episode of the show, which again, it supports my theory on this just being the heartbeat of a Time Lord. All you can really hear is the melody part of the melody section of the theme, melody 1, melody 2, and the middle 8 theme. And going back to series 12 for a second there, in the much debated and very divisive and polarizing episode, The Timeless Children, when the Doctor is trapped inside the Matrix herself and is forced to use all of her memories to break out of the Matrix herself. You see all flashes of all the memories that the Doctor has had over the past 50 plus years of the show being coupled with the main theme for the 13th Doctor, which again supports my personal theory that not only the Four Knocks is the heartbeat of a Time Lord, but that the music itself is just the music that the Doctor hears in her head, or rather, the Doctor's brain thinking, sort of rather just a part of the Doctor's psyche, which is where we are being previewed to every single time we watch an episode of the show. Another hint towards that was actually in series 11 in Jodie Whittaker's debut episode, which did not actually feature an opening title sequence. The title sequence was debuted in the second episode of that season, The Ghost Monument. However, the theme itself can slightly be heard in The Woman Who Fell to Earth, Jodie Whittaker's first episode, right immediately after she crash landed into the train and got up. You can actually hear a version of that theme being played in the background while the Doctor is still very disorientated after regenerating and falling several miles from the sky and crashing into a train. So again, it just reinforces my theory on this being the main sound that the Doctor hears in her head. Obviously, Jodie Whittaker has one more episode to go with the Segun Akinoa composing, and by the time we reach the 60th anniversary specials, Murray Gold has already been announced to return to compose at least the first 3 specials. No idea if he'll be composing Series 14 with Ncuti Gatwa as the Doctor. That is a story for another time. Once again, I apologize for a disjointed and discombobulated episode, and for going longer than I normally do on my own. And sorry for the interruption of Mr. Soda, but that was just a hint that I really need to get this episode done and underway. Next week, we will be discussing some Big Finish related music, which I can't wait to learn more about that specifically for that episode. Hopefully, I won't make a mess of myself as I did today, and won't forget certain elements like I did today. I can be found on my own YouTube channel, 50 Shades of Geek. Soda, that would just pop down here. Me and him have another show to record called The Northern Countdown, which we do with Ben. Ben and Soda can also be found on their show, Northern Rewind. Soda also has his own show on this channel called Squared Slice. Ben has his own YouTube channel called The Multiverse of Geekdom. Go ahead and check him over there. And another show we have on this channel is Have You Seen This with Daniel and Sark and Dave. You can check out our good friend Taco on his channel, Something to Talk About, and our other good friend Jess the Kiwi on her channel, Kiwi Jess. That is the roughest version of the plugs that I've ever had to do, but it was necessary because we have to wrap things up. So until next week, everybody, always remember to listen to the music of the spheres. Goodbye for now.